So let me push back a little bit on the idea that boycotting Israel or divesting from Israel is anti-Semitic. The BDS movement was kind of modeled on the movement of calling for boycotts of apartheid South Africa. It was launched after this international court had ruled that Israel's separation barrier that was mostly built inside the West Bank on Palestinian land was illegal. Israel has now been classified as practicing apartheid even by Israel's own leading human rights organizations. Boycotts and divestment is a nonviolent tactic. And it's true that Israel isn't necessarily the only or even worst human rights abuser in the world. But the BDS movement came from Palestinian civil society. And Palestinians said, we ask the world to boycott as a nonviolent effort to try to bring us our rights. And that seems to me to put Israel in a different category than countries that are doing terrible things, where the civil society of the oppressed people have not come together and asked for a boycott. It's like a picket line in front of a business, and they say, please don't cross the picket line, right? That distinguishes the business from another business that's doing bad things, but where there isn't a picket line. So if Palestinians are asking that Israel be boycotted, and it's a nonviolent tactic, why is it anti-Semitic in intent? Sorry, not in intent, but in effect.
I think it's anti-Semitic in effect because Israel is heavily defined as the Jewish state.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no doubt, and I don't think you should have any doubt,
Mm-hmm.
that if there was a highly problematic practice that was being pursued in 11 countries around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and that someone advocated that only Nigeria
Mm-hmm.
be boycotted because of that, the decision to boycott Nigeria, but not Italy,
Mm-hmm.
but not Thailand, would be deemed to have a racist element. And that would be surely a widely held view in university communities and probably would not be an unreasonable view.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that in making judgments about this, the degree of evil is relevant, the degree of connection and resonance with concerns in our own country is relevant, the extent to which the victims are asking and encouraging allies to do this, all of those things enter into a sensible calculus. But I have no doubt that if an African country were being singled out heavily, it would be thought of as racist. If an Asian country were being singled out, it would be widely seen as anti-Asian, and that's why I felt that saying that it would be anti-Semitic in its effect would be there. Now, there's a question as to how best to judge whether I'm right or not. I think it's certainly the case in 2002. I would admit that there's more ambiguity today. It certainly was the case in 2002 that the Jewish community around the world would have seen a decision of that kind by Harvard as anti-Semitic. Now, that shouldn't necessarily be entirely defining of what is anti-Semitic, but it is part of reaching a judgment about what is anti-Semitic.
Right. But I guess, I mean, on the question of being singled out, the U.S. imposes sanctions on many, many countries. Many countries that we consider human rights abusers already have sanctions from the U.S. government, right? It means to be part of the reason for the BDS movement is precisely because unlike a lot of other countries that have been found to commit human rights abuses, China, Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, where the U.S. government has imposed sanctions, this is a situation where the U.S. government actually is giving Israel all of these weapons. And so under those conditions, calling for a boycott of that country doesn't seem to me singling out in the way you're suggesting, as if all these other countries are getting off scot-free.
So I think there are several points to be made. First of all, we're not talking about appeals to the U.S. government. And if we were talking about appeals to the U.S. government, there might be a different set of standards, and
mhm,
I, as president of Harvard, wouldn't be addressing
mhm,
the U.S. government. And
mhm,
Harvard certainly was involved in extensive cooperation
mhm,
with China
mhm,
in the relevant intervals. Harvard was involved with substantial involvement with Iran
mhm,
during this period. Harvard was involved in substantial cooperation with Saudi Arabia during this period. So, some argument that this was simply a call to have
mhm,
the same standard
mhm,
applied to Israel
mhm,
that Harvard was applying to other countries,
mhm,
I actually think is not
mhm,
a tenable
mhm,
argument.
mhm,
The closest thing there is to an analogy is the one that you referenced
mhm,
earlier, Peter, to South Africa.
mhm,
But I think there's a difference uh, between occupied territories in the aftermath of a war
mhm,
and the situation that took place in South Africa. And
mhm,
I am very much aware of the flaws of Israeli society with respect to its Arab and Palestinian populations
mhm,
uh, in uh, is in Israel, but at the same time, I don't think that the oppression standard is quite the right standard to apply. And I also think there is uh, context and judgment that has to be applied here as to whether the extent to which there is a self-defense rationale,
mhm,
not necessarily that the level of social self-defense is
mhm,
appropriate,
mhm,
but the existence of the Intifada
mhm,
is surely relevant in thinking about the moral calculus in 2002.
mhm,
The nature of the Hamas attack
mhm,
is certainly relevant
mhm.
in thinking about the appropriate response in October of 2023.
Mhm.
So I I'm comfortable with the positions that I have taken.
Mhm.
To be clear, that is certainly not to say that if the choices were mine, I would make the choices that Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli government
Mhm.
have made. That is not to say that I don't think strong criticism of some of the choices
Mhm.
they have made are appropriate.
Mhm.
But I do think that the way in which I have spoken about what the consequences of certain actions would be uh, is appropriate. And I
It-
must say, Peter, I'll just say
yeah.
just one more observation. Something that surprised me.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure this won't carry a lot of weight with you, but it did influence me. Um, in the wake of my remarks,
Mhm.
I was kind of overwhelmed by the number of people inside the community
Mhm.
who reached out to congratulate me for my courage.
Right.
I thought I had been thoughtful,
Right.
had contributed usefully to a debate, but I didn't think I'd been particularly courageous
Yeah.
because I didn't think I was putting anything of me at great risk.
Mhm.
Um, but the fact that so many people felt that I had been courageous said to me that there was much more in the environment
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
that people found inhibiting of expressing
Mhm.
the kind of opinion that I had expressed than I had realized.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is part of what has kept me going
Mhm.
on this stream.
This has been a free preview of my conversation. If you'd like to hear the rest and support my work, please consider subscribing at peterbeinart.substack.com.